living longer, living healthier, living better than ever before. Welcome to Mountain Pacific's Healthy Living for Life, a weekly series that gives you the information, education, and expert insight you need to become an active participant in today's ever-changing healthcare climate. Here now is today's program host.
Anytime you seek healthcare, you have rights as a patient. Many of those rights are guaranteed to you under federal law. Welcome to Healthy Living for Life, a show dedicated to helping you do just that. I'm your host, Beth Brown. Today, we're taking a good, hard look at what you need to know as a patient so you can advocate for your safety and for your privacy. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after this commercial break. Welcome back. Joining us today is Kimberly Pepper, who is a board-certified chaplain, and she is going to talk to us about what we need to understand as a patient and what our patient rights are. So thanks so much for being here today, Kimberly.
Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. So let's start out by talking about the Patient Bill of Rights, which was first developed in the 1970s, I understand, but it's gone through some revisions over the years. I believe it focuses on what someone can expect if they're hospitalized. Can you just give us a general overview of what that Bill of Rights is?
Yeah, So the Patient Bill of Rights was, as you said, developed in 1973 by the American Hospital Association, and so it was developed with the hope and the expectation that hospitals and healthcare institutions would support these rights in the interest of delivering the very best possible patient care. And the AHA encouraged hospitals to translate and/or simplify the Bill of Rights to meet the needs of their specific patient populations, and then also to make the language, understandable for their patients and their families. And I think part of what the Bill of Rights really affirms is the collaborative nature of healthcare, that this is a partnership between the patient and the healthcare providers. It's really easy for patients, I think, we feel, we go into the doctor's office, we go into the hospital, that we're out of control. We don't have that sense of control, and the Patient Bill of Rights really helps us to see that we have that control. And the most recent revision of the Patient Bill of Rights by the AHA affirms that. They actually titled it the Patient Care Partnership. And so in its essence, it's a list of 12 expectations that every patient has regarding their healthcare, in regards to their healthcare team, their treatment, their medical records, and their privacy.
Perfect. So let's walk through some of those expectations. One is that patients have the right to informed decisions or to make informed consent. Can you talk about what that means? What's informed consent?
Sure. Informed consent means understanding your medical condition, the procedure or treatment that's being recommended, having a conversation with the provider about what the procedure or treatment involves, its risks, its benefits, what recovery will look like, and then asking questions all along the way. If we don't understand the terminology or explanation, being persistent in asking questions, and until we have a complete understanding of what the treatment or procedure is and what is being recommended and what this is going to look like for us. So
does everything that happens in a hospital require informed consent, or is it just for certain procedures?
Well, upon admission to a hospital, there's a blanket consent form that is asked to be signed, and that covers treatment and billing and just kind of the general hospital experience. Certain procedures do require additional consent forms, so any procedure that's considered invasive or involves surgery, that will require a separate consent.
Okay. And you talked earlier about this being a partnership. So when it comes to informed consent, what role would you say the patient plays in that?
Asking questions as many times as we need to until we fully understand. I think we've probably all had that experience of being in the provider's office or the hospital, and we can feel that the provider is hurried, and maybe we have more questions than we think, that I don't know if he or she has the time to answer those. But really keep asking until we have a complete understanding of what the procedure is, why it's being recommended, again, its risks and its benefits for us, and how it's going to affect us. And, part of that too can be having someone with us that can be an extra set of eyes and ears and taking notes for us and asking questions as well on our behalf.
Okay, can someone refuse consent? And then if they do, what happens?
They can absolutely refuse to consent. They can refuse treatment, and that, of course, will be honored. Then for a specific procedure, that won't be. Then the procedure won't be done. The provider will, of course, explain the risks of not receiving the treatment. And if the patient still doesn't want that particular procedure, well, then there'll be a conversation between the healthcare team and the patient about other procedures and treatments that can be explored. What can we do? And they'll work to develop a plan of care that will be acceptable to the patient, but also that keeps the patient safe and promotes the patient's healing.
Okay, and what if there's an emergency or that person is incapable of giving consent? What happens in that case?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in an emergency situation lacking an advance directive, the person will receive stabilizing treatment, and in the meantime, the care team will look for a person who can, by law, make decisions on behalf of the patient.
Okay, and then I think we have time for one more question here. So the Patient Bill of Rights also talks about getting considerate and respectful care. What does that mean?
I think this is really the heart of the Patient Bill of Rights. It means that the patient has the right to care without regard to race, creed, religion, gender, physical or mental disability, age, national origin, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, cultural, economic, language, educational background, criminal background, or the source of payment for care. It really means that every person has intrinsic dignity and value and will be treated as such and should be treated as such in the healthcare system.
That's great. Okay, Kimberly, thanks. We do need to pause here for a quick break, but we have much more to talk about when it comes to your rights as a patient. Stick around. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back. We're still talking with Kimberly Pepper about the Patient Bill of Rights, and we're going to continue talking about some of those expectations or rights. So Kimberly, thanks so much for sticking around with us. So the Patient Bill of Rights talks about advance directives and that everyone has a right to have an advance directive concerning their treatment. I think most of us has probably heard that term, but can you talk a little bit, because there are different types of advance directives, is that correct? What are some of the different kinds?
Yeah. So there are advance directives can kind of be an umbrella term that covers some different documents. So one type of advance directive is a medical power of attorney. And if someone is deciding which one they want to choose, this one might be the most important. The medical power of attorney is someone that you empower to make your healthcare decisions for you if you can't make them for yourself. And that's a really important piece of that, because sometimes people will think, well, if I have someone be my medical power of attorney, then that just means they take over right now making my medical decisions. And that's not true. It's only if the person is incapacitated and cannot make those decisions on their own. Another part of the advance directive documents is the living will. And so this is a document that people can complete that talks about the type of care they would want if they had a terminal illness or an irreversible condition. And so this is when we're talking about would you want to be resuscitated? Would you want to be on a ventilator? Would you want to have a feeding tube? Or receive hydration through IVs. So they're really talking about what they would want as I said, in a terminal or irreversible condition. And then another type of form is the physician's orders for life-sustaining treatment, or POLST form, as it's called in Montana. And I think every state has the form, but they call it a little bit a different name. But that is actually a physician's order that will be completed, of course, with the patient's consent, and talks about again what type of treatment they would want in a terminal or irreversible condition. The POLST is really a wonderful form for someone who is really frail, and if they're found down at home and unresponsive, if the EMTs come, they're going to have to resuscitate that person, regardless of whether that person has a living will in place that says they wouldn't want to be resuscitated or a ventilator. So the POLST, carrying that weight of having a physician's order, when that's in the home, then the EMTs can look at that and they can provide the appropriate care to keep the person comfortable in accordance with their wishes.
Okay. And when should someone put an advance directive document or the documents they need or want in place? Really at any time. Any adult should have them in place. We tend to think of those as being important for the end of life, but they're really important all the time to have someone to make our decisions for us. And also, just in the event of some major life-altering situation, a major car accident or something like that, it can provide our loved ones guidance about what we would want given certain situations. A POLST form really would be more for someone, the physicians will say, if you expect that person, maybe, you wouldn't be surprised if that person were to die like in the next, within 12 months. It really is more for people who are, with a terminal condition at the end of life. But living will and medical power of attorney, we should all have those in place. Okay. And so if someone wants to put those documents in place and does not have them yet, where do they go? What do they do? How do you go about doing that? They're accessible through so many forums. Of course, through the primary care providers will have them. Hospital systems will have those available, and also you can get them online. Many of the, of course, if you go through your provider or a hospital system, they often have staff who can assist you step by step with completing those documents and answering your questions as you fill them out, because they are, they can be hard to fill out, and you're really thinking through a lot of your own life values, and so it can really help to have someone there to help you navigate that and navigate what's important to you. Okay. And it's also important, once you've made those decisions, to talk with talk with your family, talk with your medical power of attorney about what you would want, and make sure you choose someone who will honor your decisions. Yeah, that's some good advice. So moving on down that patient bill of rights, now we'll talk about another one that I know is a big deal for a lot of folks, and that's making sure that you fully understand the financial impact of what is happening with your care, not only immediately, but potential long-term. So the quote, it says, the patient has the right to know the immediate and long-term financial implications of their treatment choices. So how does a person go about understanding that? I'm sorry, you blinked out there a little bit. Were you asking about the continuity of care? No, I'm sorry, about the financial impact of care, and how does someone go about understanding what the financial impact is? Yeah, so that's a really complex question, and so I think we can break that one down into two parts. There's of course those emergent acute situations. And so generally the cost for most services can be provided within 3 days for billable services. That can get a little more complicated if there are providers that are involved that are outside of the healthcare system. Some of us might have had that experience of being in the hospital and we get a bill for a doctor, a doctor that maybe wasn't part of our healthcare system, and that can be kind of confusing. So it does get more complicated, but generally, within a few days, we can know what the cost, an approximate cost at least, of what those medical services will be. For scheduled procedures, some facilities have an estimator tool out there now, which is really great. And so a patient can ask and then be provided ahead of time with the estimated cost of the procedure, the estimated cost of what the insurance will cover,
and then what will be due after the insurance is paid.
Okay.
Many facilities have financial counselors available that can assist with balances after insurance, or if the person has no insurance, with getting reductions on what the bill is and setting up payment plans. And then for people that have insurance, they can always, of course, ask their insurance provider as well.
Okay, perfect. All right, thank you. We are out of time again. We need to pause for another break. Coming up next, we'll talk about your medical records and your privacy. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Healthy Living for Life. We're still talking with Kimberly Pepper, who is a board-certified chaplain, and we're continuing on with our discussion about the Patient Bill of Rights. And so let's talk about your right to review your medical records. So what's the benefit of reviewing your medical records, would you say, Kimberly, and how would you go about getting access to them?
It's always good to know what's going on with our health. And reviewing our medical record can help us to remember what happened during a doctor's visit or a hospital admission. I think maybe most of us have had that experience of being in the hospital and or being with our doctor in the doctor's office, and we're not feeling well. And so maybe we don't completely remember everything that he or she said. And so looking at the medical record can be a good way to look back and say, oh yeah, the doctor did talk to me, about that. And so to access our medical record, every facility, every health system is going to be a little different. But you would contact the medical records office of the provider or the health system, and then they would take you through those steps. It usually involves requesting an authorization for the release of or authorization for disclosure of healthcare information, then also signing a release of information form.
What kind of information might somebody get by looking in their medical record, or is there information that they should not expect to get while looking at their medical record?
Well, it's their health history. So it gives the past medical conditions and medications, present medical conditions and medications, the history of provider visits. It's really a great asset for providers for that continuity of care. For referrals. Some of the things that you might expect to see if you missed appointments, you might find that in there. If perhaps someone wasn't compliant with the plan of care, you might find that in there as well. And also you're going to find clinical terminology. These are documents that are written by clinicians, and so there's going to be that clinical language that we might not always understand. So that can be challenging as well. A helpful tool that many health systems are providing now is a patient portal, which doesn't quite have the detail that the medical record does, but it still has the history of visits, test results, and also just what the results of provider visits, and that can be really helpful as well. Again, it's not as detailed, but it's information that's right at your fingertips if you have internet access.
Okay, great. And so the Patient Bill of Rights also talks about privacy, and so we'll talk about that, but Hipaa builds on that as well. And Hipaa stands for the Healthcare Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, and people have probably heard of Hipaa before and privacy. Specifically the privacy rule that's under Hipaa. Can you speak to the privacy rule for us a little bit?
Sure. The Hipaa privacy rule is a really important part of our healthcare. And it's the major goal of Hipaa was to ensure that individuals' health information is properly protected, but while at the same time allowing for that free flow of information, health information needed to provide and promote high quality health care with those providers who need to know that information. So it seeks to strike that balance that permits that important uses of information while at the same time protecting the privacy of people who are seeking health care.
So when can a provider talk about my health care, either to my friends or to my family member?
So as long as you don't object, Your healthcare provider is allowed to share or discuss your health information with your family or friends or others involved in your care. Your provider may ask for your permission. They may tell you that he or she plans to discuss the information and give you an opportunity to object, or they may decide using their own professional judgment that you don't object. But in any of these cases, the important thing to remember is that your healthcare provider may only discuss information that the person needs to know about your current care, your current condition. So the provider can't discuss information or your condition with family or friends about other conditions, and they can't discuss it if you ask them not to.
Okay, great. That was going to be my next question. So if you do want your health care to just be kept between you and your provider, you would just talk to your provider about that?
You would. Now, when you're admitted to the hospital, that's one of the admission questions. And so if you wish your admission to be confidential, then that will be made so. So anyone who would call the hospital to say, is so-and-so there at the hospital, they will not be able to say that you're at the hospital. And that information will be, the confidentiality will remain on not only in your electronic health record, but also the paper chart that's written at kept at the nurse's station.
Okay. All right, Kimberly, we're actually just about out of time. If people want more information about their rights or about Hipaa, where do they go?
They can go to the Health and Human Services Civil Rights website. They have a lot of information available to help you understand. Sorry about that. Understand Hipaa. And also CMS, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, also has information on their website as well for those who are beneficiaries of those services.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for all that information. I appreciate your time today.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for watching today. We hope you'll come back next week and join us again. Until then, stay fit, stay well, and stay healthy for life with Healthy Living for Life. See you next week.
Healthy Living for Life is brought to you by Mountain Pacific Quality Health in partnership with AARP Montana. We'd love to hear from you. If you have suggestions for future programs, visit our website at mpqhf.org or call us at 406-443-4020. You can also catch us on YouTube by visiting our website and clicking on the Healthy Living for Life logo. Production facilities provided by Video Express Productions.